Thank you everyone for joining us once again for another installment of the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation's COVID-19 Economic Implications webinar series. My name is Shane Cullen and I am the Event Programs Manager for the LAEDC and will once again be your moderator this morning. We are joined as always by LAEDC CEO Bill Allen and the Director of the LAEDC's Institute for Applied Economics, Shannon Sedgwick, who will provide insight into the impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the region's economy. Now, I'd like to introduce the CEO of the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, Bill Allen.
Thank you, Shane. Welcome, everybody. I know many of you have been regular visitors to this series of economic insight webinars that we've been hosting, and some of you may be new today. I'll just briefly share with you that the LADC exists to advance economic opportunity and prosperity for all of the residents of Los Angeles County. And we do that by providing economic research insights that help us understand the nuances of our economy and the different demographics and geographies and industry sectors so that we can extend opportunity to every corner of our county and every individual and community in our county. We provide business assistance services, we provide public policy advocacy, we attract foreign investment to the region that creates jobs and tax base. And we do this because of the support of members and sponsors throughout the region, and we're very, very grateful to all those members and sponsors. I hope all of you enjoyed a wonderful Mother's Day on Sunday. If you are moms, thank you for the wonderful, wonderful things you do as mothers in our lives. And if you celebrated with your moms, I hope you had a wonderful opportunity to do that. It's important for us to keep these family ties close. As we're going through social distancing, let's continue to physically distance, but not be socially apart from each other. As you will hear from Shannon Sedgwick today, there are a lot of headline numbers in the news lately. You will hear about the number of cases around the state and in our region. You'll hear about the number of people who've filed for unemployment in our state and across the nation. These are daunting numbers. Behind these numbers are people. The reason our Institute for Applied Economics provides these insights webinars each week is so that we understand more of the nuances of who's impacted, what ages, what gender, what ethnicities and races are being disproportionately impacted by the economic impacts of this pandemic. You've also heard a lot about our state budget. $54 billion deficit projected over the remainder of this fiscal year and next fiscal year, $42 billion of projected shortfall in tax revenues, $12 billion in additional expenses. But what does that mean for our cities in the region? Shannon's going to give you some insights into how our 88 cities are likely to be impacted. She's going to provide some insights into how their revenues are structured. What are the forms of taxes in our different cities? Which cities are more exposed than others to the impacts of this pandemic? We are really appreciative that you're all tuning in. I'm going to ask Shannon to take her time today because she has so many insights to share about what we learned from Friday's Bureau of Labor Statistics releases of the April unemployment figures, the 20.5 million filings for unemployment, what that means for the state and local government. She has some insights about the state and local impacts. There'll be more to come in the next couple of weeks, but I want you all to really pay close attention today. Feel free to ask questions either today if there's time or send them to us and we'll deal with them in subsequent weeks because helping you all make more informed decisions as individuals, as employers, as civic stewards in our community is why we provide these webinars. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Shannon Sedgwick, the Director of the LADC Institute for Applied Economics, to give us an update on the economy, who it's impacting, and how our cities will be impacted because they are essential for providing the basic public services that help lead a quality of life for us. And so we need to understand and support them in the weeks and months ahead as we continue to support our small business community and the key sectors that have been so devastated by the economic impacts of this pandemic. Shannon, it's all yours.
Thank you, Bill. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the LADC for these Monday morning updates on the economic implications of COVID-19. I hope that you and your families are continuing to stay safe through this global health crisis. This is the 8th week of the Safer at Home order, and while Friday marked the beginning of stage 2 of a 5-stage reopening process, a significant portion of our economy still remains closed. This week, Los Angeles County's reported cases of COVID-19 are moving towards 32,000 in the county, and our county's share of all cases of COVID-19 in the state has reached just under 48%, and the number of deaths moving past 1,500 over the weekend, accounting for about 57% of all COVID-19 deaths in California. Of those who died, 92% had underlying health conditions, and African Americans, Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, and people living in communities with high levels of poverty continue to have the highest rate of death per 100,000 people for COVID-19 when compared to other groups. New data for initial unemployment claims, which measures emerging unemployment, now has total initial claim filings numbering over 3.9 million in California over the last 7 weeks. We have additional demographic and industry data for initial unemployment insurance claims filed in California from mid-March to April 25th. We can use this UI claims data to better understand the magnitude of COVID-19's labor market impacts and how different types of workers are experiencing these impacts. You can see that young workers have been disproportionately impacted. Over 23% of workers who are 16 to 19 years old in the labor force have filed an unemployment claim. For those in the labor force who are 20 to 24 years old, just under 30% have filed an unemployment claim. There are also marked racial and ethnic disparities. For example, 20% of those who identify as Asian in the labor force have filed an unemployment claim. Similarly, 20% of all African Americans in the labor force have filed. Women have filed more unemployment claims over the period, with just over 21% of women in the labor force filing a claim versus less than 17% for men. And as expected, those with a high school diploma or GED were hit the hardest, with about 45% of those in the labor force with this level of educational attainment filing an unemployment claim. Only 3.8% of those in the labor force with a graduate degree filed a claim. The industry distribution of initial unemployment claims in LA County is displayed here. Over 1 million initial unemployment claims were filed in the county from mid-March to April 25th. The highest risk industries in red figure prominently, accounting for roughly 42% of all unemployment claims. But this chart can be a bit deceiving as it only displays the number of claims filed. It does not take into account the size of the industry to begin with. This chart illustrates that point. While claims filed in the arts, entertainment, and recreation industry only accounted for 5% of total UI claims filed in LA County, it represents a significant share of the workers in that industry. For example, over 45% of the labor force in the arts, entertainment, and recreation industry in California has filed an unemployment claim from mid-March to April 25th. And more than a third of the labor force in accommodation and food services has filed a claim over the period. April labor force data, it's the first full month to reflect the Safer at Home order and the closure of non-essential businesses. So we expected unemployment to spike precipitously, and it did. State and local data will be released in a couple of weeks, but the U.S. employment situation, which was released Friday, gives us an indication of what we can expect. U.S. unemployment spiked to 14.7% in April from 4.4% in March, representing the largest month-over-month rise in history. Overall, non-farm payroll employment plummeted, hemorrhaging 20.5 million payroll jobs in April. Nearly 7.7 million jobs were lost in the leisure and hospitality sector in April, accounting for just over 37% of total jobs lost across all industry sectors. This chart reveals that during April, Every single industry sector experienced employment losses nationally. In addition to leisure and hospitality, as expected, one of the hardest hit sectors was the other services sector, which includes especially vulnerable industries such as personal services, so beauty salons and barber shops, repair services, and pet services such as grooming. This sector saw a decline of 1.3 million jobs. Unemployment rates across the industries are varied, with financial activities and agriculture on the low end, and leisure and hospitality, other services, and wholesale and retail trade on the high end. In a couple of weeks, we will know how the Los Angeles County labor market was impacted in comparison. Again, we predict an unprecedented spike in unemployment. Friday marked the beginning of the second stage of the reopening process, where florists and some non-essential retailers can reopen under strict guidelines, as well as car dealerships, golf courses, and the reopening of trails. The gradual uptick in activity will help slow job loss moving forward. While unemployment is a huge byproduct of the closure of non-essential businesses, these closures also result in the stoppage of revenues paid by these businesses to government coffers. Cities in LA County are facing severe revenue shortages as a result of the Safer at Home order and mandated closures of non-essential businesses. Without a sizable federal stimulus package targeting cities and states, which is currently being debated in Congress, budget shortfalls will force cities of all sizes to make some really tough choices, including perhaps significant reductions or cuts to core public services and programs. This in addition to layoffs and or furloughs of staff. The LAEDC Institute for Applied Economics looked at the tax structure of each of the 88 cities in Los Angeles County to identify the degree of their exposure to COVID-19's impact on their general fund revenues. Revenue sources include sales tax, hotel or bed taxes, property transfer taxes, utility taxes, investments, forfeitures, and fines, and parking and admissions. So we grouped revenue sources according to their elasticity to identify sources most at risk to immediate impacts due to COVID-19, i.e. those that are elastic, and those whose impact will be felt in the longer term, i.e. those that are inelastic. Retail sales and hotel bed taxes have plummeted during the Safer at Home order, and unemployment is climbing sharply. So as expected, cities that generate a large share of their revenues from these sales, hotel occupancy, or income taxes will be hit hardest. To determine which cities are most exposed in the near term, we evaluated the share of regional employment in high-risk industries together with the share of general fund revenues from sales, hotel occupancy, and income taxes across all 88 cities in the county. Cities with both a vulnerable economic base, one that has a larger share, i.e. over 15% of employment in high-risk industries, and a more exposed tax structure, or one highly reliant on elastic sources of revenue, i.e. over 25% share of general fund revenues, will see their bottom lines affected more quickly than those with alternative economic and fiscal structures. Fiscal exposure is varied throughout the county. This map depicts exposure related to sales and use taxes and hotel bed taxes. For example, highly exposed cities include Santa Monica, Glendale, and Pomona. And this map depicts the tax exposure of cities across LA County related to business and franchise taxes and licenses and permits, in addition to sales and use taxes and hotel bed taxes. These cities include Northridge, Inglewood, and the city of Los Angeles. Though LA County has a large number of jobs in industries with a high risk of job loss, a large share of LA County's fiscal revenue comes from inelastic sources such as property taxes. So the county itself should be less exposed over the short term than, for example, LA County cities that depend more on sales and hotel occupancy taxes. Cities that have the least fiscal exposure to the COVID-19 disruption include Rolling Hills, Palos Verdes Estates, Diamond Bar, and La Cañada Flint Ridge. We will be releasing a paper detailing the fiscal exposure of all 88 cities in Los Angeles County by the end of this week. Next, Bill and I will be answering questions.
Thank you very much, Shannon, and Bill, for both sharing your insights for today. We do have several questions lined up for you today. Bill, we're going to start with you. And Bill, the question for you is, what would a 21st century New Deal look like, and how would it drive a restructuring for a new, more equitable economy and society?
Great question, Shane. Thank you. It's important that any New Deal infrastructure investment program be just that, a 21st century New Deal infrastructure investment program. Building not just on traditional 20th century forms of infrastructure, roads and bridges and other similar projects, but really the 21st century foundations of a healthy economy, and that is energy, renewable energy, that is broadband access, that is healthcare and biomedicine. And we've seen the inequities that have been revealed by this pandemic. And so it's important that we focus on, as we look at renewable energy, the opportunity to create more renewable energy, more zero emissions manufacturing, assembly, adoption of vehicles, light, medium, heavy duty vehicles for passengers, for industry, and that we make them, particularly for passenger vehicles, more affordable with incentives for folks of more incomes rather than the high income folks who've been the early adopters of these technologies. But we also have to look at healthcare inequities and recognize that there are deserts within many of our communities where there just aren't quality doctors and quality healthcare institutions, hospitals available. We really should be investing more in healthcare institutions in our lower income communities. We should be investing more in broadband access for all in our low-income urban communities and across our rural communities all across this nation. Another set of inequities revealed by this pandemic is how few people in low-income communities and rural communities had access to broadband and were able to either telework or telestudy or get telehealth services. So when we think of how many of our students in our own school districts here in Los Angeles County or in our community college district did not have the necessary broadband access to continue their studies, or did not have the hardware with which to connect to such access if they even did have it in their neighborhood, we revealed the disparities that exist in our community. And we must address those. If we expect people to be able to compete in a modern, advanced economy, which is ever more hurtling towards a knowledge-based economy, they have to be prepared to work in a world of automation, in a world with automation. There'll probably be a move for more robotics and more automation because factories and other places of business can continue working without regard to public health if it's robots doing the work as opposed to us frail humans who could become infected by a virus. But as we move towards that, that means the people in our society who work in these industries have to be able to work with automation. And that requires technological training, which must happen in our schools. It must happen in our community colleges. And if we have to be studying from home or working from home, we need that technology. So a national broadband infrastructure to get us all accessing the resources available through telestudying, telemedicine, teleworking is going to be absolutely essential. And education, how we're going to redesign our K through 12 schools, our community colleges, our four-year universities, to again be positioned for the knowledge economy of the 21st century requires investment in our educational institutions as well as in our students. So as we think about a New Deal, as we think about infrastructure investments, at the LAEDC we think we really have to be thinking about what makes up a foundation for a 21st century economy and how do we invest in the energy, in the healthcare, in the education, in the communications technologies that afford all of us a chance to participate in the benefits of that. As I started this session today saying our mission is to advance opportunity and prosperity for all, you can see why that informs our view of what a New Deal infrastructure program designed to create a more equitable and resilient economy looks like.
Next question is for you, Shannon. Are there learnings from Asia or Europe on how we might reopen business?
Well, they've been opening in phases as well. They're requiring masks, especially on public transit, and they're requiring social distancing to continue. In some countries, manufacturing, small museums, small retail establishments, they've opened, but all industries have guidelines to follow. Greece is staggering working hours. And like here, cafes and restaurants are offering takeout services. There's a number of countries, they all rely on tourism as a major element of their economies. So many would like to resume the tourism, but they're really trying to find ways to do so safely. So with screenings and self-quarantines. And some countries are holding off on large gatherings, so professional sports and concerts, et cetera, to prepare for a second wave that may hit in the fall.
Shane, can I add, our county has created a recovery and resiliency task force. They're naming more members to it this week. They named the initial task force members last week. I believe they had their first meeting last Friday. And as I understand it, they're charged with dealing with a number of these issues. And so I would encourage all of the participants in today's webinar, who I know come from our business and government and education communities, labor communities, and other community serving organizations, to be in contact with that task force and to give them your best thinking and ideas, because they're going to be trying to establish some rules of the road and some helpful recommendations, I believe, sector by sector, across about a dozen sectors of our economy to help ensure a successful reopening, recovery, reinvention of these different sectors. So again, that's my message to all the participants. We certainly will be. We already sent a letter to that group about 10 days ago, and we'll be continuing to provide input and insight and hopefully helpful data to the group, because it's, I think, important that as we think about this, we think about it regionally. There'll be local implications, but most of our industry sectors exist across this county. They may be located to a different degree in different cities or unincorporated communities of the county, but most of the sectors that the County Task Force will be dealing with are spread across the county, and what works in one county to open a restaurant is probably helpful in another part of the county. The task force are very bright people. We've got a lot of bright people in our organization, but one of the powers of our organization is folks like you who are participating in this webinar today who have wonderful ideas. I encourage you to forward your insights and recommendations or even thoughts for consideration to that task force very quickly this week, as they're getting to work right away.
And Shannon, a question that did come through, and just regarding the data that you showcased today, did any of those estimates include impact on gig workers?
The answer is yes. So gig workers, they're employed across a number of industry sectors, and so they count as being unemployed as well. So whichever industry that they're working in, they will show up as being unemployed if they don't have a job, and they are eligible for unemployment benefits just like everybody else through EDD.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. Thanks for the clarification. And Bill, I want to toss a question for input over to you. The statement is, I believe that there is an opportunity for the LAEDC to be a mover in promoting the need to totally reform the state tax system to more fairly represent the nature of the future and current economy. Any input on that?
It's not something we've studied lately. It's something that has come up over the years. A former chairman of ours, Bob Hertzberg, a state Senate majority leader, has had some different proposals to try and create a more broadly applied tax structure across the state, and I'm quite sure the state will be considering these things with a $54 billion deficit. They're going to have to look at their tax structure, which has been so dependent on income taxes and sales taxes and others that have been impacted. It's possible that we'll be asked to look at that, and we may in the weeks and months ahead, but at this moment we don't have a current study or current offerings for the state.
And one last question, Bill, just in regards to the task force you mentioned. Is there a way to contact the task force with ideas?
That's a good question. I believe Kevin McGowan, who's with the Office of Emergency Services or Office of Emergency Management with the County of Los Angeles, is leading the initiative. My guess is the county will have something available on their website. But if people would like to send recommendations through us, they can reach out to any of us at the LAEDC, and we're more than happy to pass them along to our contacts. We have a number of people who are on the task force and will be on different working groups, and we're more than happy to pass on those ideas if you have any difficulty getting them to the task force members directly. And I'll just mention, because I see we're running out of time, I remind everybody we have a lot of resources available, and maybe we'll be able to post contacts for the task force on our coronavirus resource page at laedc.org/coronavirus. We've had over 70,000 visitors in the last several weeks to that resource page. We provide helpful resources in English and Spanish. People are spending over 3 or 4 minutes on that page per visit. That's an unusually long time on the internet, but that's because they're finding real value. And hundreds of the businesses who have visited there have gotten in touch with either our community connectory staff or our business assistance staff and are actively engaged in one-on-one assistance programs. So again, if any of you or your clients or colleagues or family members are looking for additional help getting through this crisis, particularly financial help, do visit that resource page and do contact our connectory team, because we're more than happy to help you get through this crisis.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Bill and Shannon, and to all of our attendees today. Thank you so much for joining us. The website or webpage that Bill was referencing is now on your screen, that first bullet point. So we do encourage you to visit that for all additional resources. And then, of course, if you do have any additional questions that you would like answered, please feel free to email it to shane.cullen@laedc.org. That is also on your screen.
And Shane, can we email Shannon's report at the end of the week to the participants today, since she teased it?
Absolutely, we can.
That would be wonderful.
And so, as Bill mentioned, we will email that later at the end of the week. But as a reminder, all registrants for today will receive an email tomorrow with a link to a recording of today's webinar, as well as a link to register for next Monday's webinar on May 18th. So thank you, everybody, once again for joining us. We hope you will join us next Monday and have a wonderful week.